Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll start our meeting with awards and recognition, and first we would like to recognize outgoing board member Commissioner Richard Bennett, who represented the beach communities for the past 6 years. Brad, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning. There he goes.
I had to turn in my badge.
Aw.
But, like all PSA board members, you get a lifetime badge. Thank you very much, Richard, for your service. He has been serving the beaches, representing the beaches community for the last 6 years on PSTA, and a member, I think, that whole time of our PSA Finance Committee. And so those who also serve on the Finance Committee know that you have been a very good attendee of the meetings and asked a lot of really good questions. I think that it has been your hallmark on PSTA, has shown an interest in what we do and in transportation, which I think is in your background even. I remember a story that I heard from Commissioner Long, who said that she met you before one of the Leadership PSTA graduation ceremonies. And she said, oh, how, early on in your time on PSTA, and she said, oh, how is your time on, how do you like PSTA? And you said, oh, I really like it. I'm really interested. Very much interested in transportation. And I really like having my one-on-ones with Brad. So I really enjoyed that too. I really enjoyed participating with you, going to Tallahassee with you, and really want to thank you for your service. You get this as well, and I understand you have some of your family here with you.
My wife is here, Mary, and my daughter Kimberly, who just recently retired from the military. She brought her home in St. Petersburg so she could take care of me.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
I'll do it. I'll come take a picture. Come on. I moved all the way here for that.
There we go. Move on this way.
So nice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay, sure. Give me the microphone. Just a couple of words. I've really appreciated and enjoyed being on the board. I've got to meet all of you, and it's been a good experience. I went to Tallahassee with Brad, and it's an unusual board to be on because I'm accustomed to being on a board with the auto industry. And our job on the board with the auto industry was to save pennies, dollars, and nickels every day so that we could operate with a budget. Sometimes they would come to us and say, you have to cut your budget by $30 million. So we'd have to figure out some way to do that. And it was unusual for me to spend time here because the finances and the budgets are different. And when you're operating with taxpayers, things are different. But I have enjoyed the time, and I enjoyed being with all you. I enjoyed sitting with Vince and with Joshua, so it was a good time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett, it's been an honor to serve on the board of PSTA with you. You always ask good questions and have really thoughtful input on all of the issues that we take up here on the board. PSTA is truly a better place because of your service, and I appreciate that, and I wish you all the best. All right, next we will, we have a welcome for our new board member. Taking that seat and representing the Beaches community now is the mayor of St. Pete Beach. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to
Thank
be here.
you. Did you want to say a few words, or?
Just want to say, big thank you to the Big C for the appointment. I'm looking forward to representing, the beaches, our town, as well as the rest of Pinellas residents. So I'm happy to be here and serve on this board, and I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully in 6 years, we'll be able to do the same, so.
Yes, absolutely, and very glad that you're here, and looking forward to having your voice here at the table.
Thank you so much.
All right, and next we have our big announcement that was made recently, and that is the APTA Outstanding Transit System of the Year Award that has been presented at PSTA. We will go out and take a big photo of the board, but before we do that, Stephanie Weaver, PSTA's Acting Marketing and Communications Director, will present this great recognition for PSTA. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning, Chair Driscoll. Good morning, fellow PSTA board members. Thank you for being here today. Oh, let me make sure. Is this guy on? Technical difficulties? Go. Oh, excuse me. So again, my name is Stephanie Weaver, and I am the Acting Director of Marketing and Communications. And I am here to give you guys a little bit of a recap of PSTA's award-winning month of October. So a few weeks ago was the annual American Public Transportation Association, or APTA, Conference and Expo, where hundreds of transit agencies across the country gathered to celebrate their achievements and victories within the last year. In addition, the annual Florida Public Transportation Association, or FPTA, conference was held at the same location, but just honoring all of the best transit agencies within the state of Florida. And I'm here to tell you that PSTA was honored in the best way. We had many recognitions, from staff graduating leadership programs to getting scholarship winners, and we are the best in the business. And we truly clean swept the competition. And not to mention, as you can see right in front of me, we brought home a lot of hardware. So I'm going to show you what we won. First up was our Leaders of Tomorrow. Our very own Devin Deal and BJ Gavin graduated from various leadership classes. So congratulations to BJ and Devin. At PSTA, you guys already know we have a very highly motivated group of staff. And our very own Mr. Al Burns graduated from Leadership APTA, class of 2023. And Tamika White will be in the class of Leadership APTA 2024. So we wish her the best of luck. At PSTA, we always want to continue to learn and grow our skills within the transit industry. We had 2 scholarship winners from PSTA, Ms. Nicole Dufa, and once again, Tamika White. Our marketing department continued its winning ways with a first place award from FPTA for the electronic media and TV category. We won first place. And we also won an APTA Grand Award, which is the best in the nation for our marketing and communications efforts. So go marketing. You guys already know that we have an award-winning transportation team, and it was recognized the last few weeks ago. First up, we had Derek Brown winning second place for Bus Technician of the Year. So congratulations to Derek. All of our drivers are the best in the state in our opinions, but one of ours was recognized from FPTA's Bus Operator of the Year, and he's here with us now, Mr. Marcus Kincaid. Way to go, Marcus. Proud of you. Not to our surprise, PSTA also won FPTA's top honor, the most outstanding transit agency within the entire state. This was based on 12 different categories over the last 3 years, and PSTA knocked it out of the park. So, that's to everybody. The last award we brought home, as many of you know, if you could see the banner behind you all, we were recognized as APTA's most outstanding transit agency based on the last 3 years, and we couldn't be more proud. Actually, at your seats, you'll see this pamphlet. This is actually our submission, so feel free to read up on what we submitted, but we're very proud to have this award. And it all is a credit to our staff, but also to all of you. So thank you for your leadership. Without you guys, we wouldn't be the best in the nation, so this is all credit to you guys, so thank you. So, in honor of this celebration, with your permission, Chair Driscoll, I would like to invite all of the board members to join me, and we're going to take a group photo out in front of the big banner outside really quickly, and then we'll get back to the boardroom to resume our meeting. So, Chair Driscoll, if you mind following me and the
Sure,
board.
we'll take a 5-minute recess to do the photo. All right, thank you. Well, there's the big one up. I think she wants the outside light.
I want this to Gina, this to Brad, this to dancer.
This is a board picture.
You can come out and have your picture taken too.
It's like, you can too.
No, I don't want to be, I don't want to be ID'd. I'm the secret guy in the back room.
Where did the bar go? Oh, wait.
I didn't stop the recording because, is that okay? Or you want me to stop it? Let it go.
Yeah, that's what I'm clicking on. It's not there. Dropped off. Yeah, I did. Start it back up. See what happened.
That was quick.
Just taking care of business.
Yeah, good. How are you?
Good. What did you think of the event?
What?
What did you think of the event? the other day?
Oh, that was, you know, I just care how many of those types of things you go to, 9/11 or whatever.
I know, it's the Italian.
You don't have it.
Sorry.
That was very, very nice, sir.
Very touching, moving.
Yep.
Oh, Latin.
Left going.
Likewise.
Yep.
We'll be in PowerPoints very soon. Or legislative. No cards. Do you have cards?
Maureen, do you have any cards?
I'm only actually looking at
We're missing Commissioner Reed. All right, we'll reconvene our meeting, and thank you all very much for taking that time for the photo, and if you want to stick around at the end, we'll have a little celebration after the meeting, and also celebrate Commissioner Bennett's service. And with that, we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any cards for citizens wishing to speak today? All right, thank you. We'll close public comment and go to the consent agenda. Are there any items that a board member wishes to pull? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. If you could please open the voting system. Do we have it?
Renee made the motion and I thought Commissioner Gal was second. It's flipped.
Oh,
I'm a yes, mine didn't.
yeah, I don't have my,
Yeah, mine is
really
enough.
need to look at that. Okay. Can we just do a,
Hey,
can we do a roll call vote, please?
I'm sorry. You want to call out their names?
Commissioner Petrelli, yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner LaValle?
yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next is our committee updates, and we'll start with a track update from Mark O'Hara, followed by my report from Ford Pinellas. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. Hi. Thank you for letting me join via Zoom. The track met via Zoom on Tuesday, October 17th. The committee enjoyed a presentation from PSTA's Director of Project Management, Abhishek Dayal, who gave us an update on the Clearwater Multimodal Transit Center. Mr. Dayal spoke about what the passenger experience will be like at the facility and shared renderings of what the new facility will look like. We were informed that PSTA has received a National Advocacy Award from APTA for the new Clearwater Transit Center project, and committee members were thanked for their advocacy. There was also a presentation from Debbie Leas, Chief Financial Officer, on fare free days offered to riders. Ms. Leas outlined the free fare days and estimated cost revenue associated with them, and the committee recommended no change be made to the free fare days offered. Additionally, PSTA's Chief Planning and Sustainability Officer, Heather Sobush, presented on the Title VI program update, which is submitted every 3 years to ensure PSTA compliance with the Civil Rights Act as an ongoing condition to receive federal funds. Members were also given more detailed information about the elimination of go-karts starting on January 1st. We expressed our hope that a robust network of retailers across Pinellas County will be developed to ensure all riders, regardless of location, will be able to obtain and fund their Flamingo cards. The committee also recommended that with a platform at Grand Central Station becoming available in early December, that Manatee County Area Transit be invited to use this space as we work towards a more cohesive regional transit network. I'm very happy to report that Brad Miller and his team are already working towards this goal. Our next meeting will be on November 14th, 2023 at 4 p.m. The location will be either in person or Zoom, and you are more than welcome to join us. And I'm always happy to take any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Any questions? All right. We appreciate the report. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next, for the Forward Pinellas report, the Forward Pinellas Board met last on October 11th, 2023. The board approved the Memorandum of Understanding for creating a Tampa Bay Regional MPO. The MOU establishes a framework for addressing key considerations of how a regional organization would work and effectively build upon the current county-based responsibilities according to federal and state laws. In other news, FDOT provided an update on the Skinner Boulevard Complete Streets project, which includes lane reduction, roundabouts, wider sidewalk connecting to the Pinellas Trail, on-street parking and bus bays, as well as wider bike lanes and a permanent pedestrian crossing signal at the Pinellas Trail. The next Forward Pinellas board meeting will be held on November 8th, 2023. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer. No? All right. Terrific. Thank you. Let's see. Next, I believe we have our information items next. And first, sorry, I got my pages switched. First would be the Sunrunner Transit-Oriented Development item, and Jacob Labutka, our planning manager, will introduce Mr. Anthony Close, who is tracking transit-oriented development around the Sunrunner stations for us. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jacob Labutka. I'm the planning manager here at PSTA, here to introduce Anthony Close from St. Pete Rising, who's going to give us a presentation. So over the last few months, we've been working with St. Pete Rising, which is an online urban development publication that tracks new and future developments in the greater St. Petersburg area. And so we thought it would be a great opportunity to partner with them to track a lot of the ongoing development that's along the Sunrunner corridor. I think anybody that's driven downtown or along the Sunrunner sees cranes for days along the corridor. And so we thought it would be a good opportunity to work with them to track the types of development and the valuation of the development along the corridor. So I'm going to pass it over to Anthony to talk about some of his initial work to track that. Anthony?
Well, good morning, everyone. As Jacob said, my name is Anthony Close, founder of St. Pete Rising. As he said, we're an online urban development publication focused on tracking real estate and everything new and coming soon to downtown St. Petersburg and South Pinellas. So Project Scope, this idea that Jacob presented, really came as a result of the Sunrunner Rising development study, which looked at land use planning around the Sunrunner stations along the corridor. And while that study made recommendations for land use changes along the corridor, we wanted to see what the result of those changes and the existing development activity along those stations currently look like, and then tracking that into the future. St. Pete Rising was founded in 2013, so I've been doing this for almost a little over 10 years now, and we focus on basically any development, large or small, along this corridor for this project. So the methodology for tracking this real estate development includes a variety of sources, including public filings, so planning documents submitted to the City of St. Petersburg and other municipalities, development interviews, real estate listings, and so forth. And so with these variety of sources, we're able to see what developments are coming along the corridor and the status of those developments almost in real time most of the time. And we also have partnerships with drone photographers that tracks existing construction activity and things along that nature. So our development baseline includes projects proposed, under construction, or recently completed at the start of the Sunrunner construction. And the metrics we're going to be tracking with this are identifying things like the project name, as well as residential units, whether they be rental units, condominium units, and townhome units, as well as hotel rooms and commercial square footage. That can come in a variety of sources, such as office space or medical office space, or even institutional space like museums or academic buildings for purposes of USF St. Pete. There's also retail square footage that we're tracking along the corridor, as well as some of the physical characteristics of these buildings. So how many stories are they, and the development value of these projects. And then we're also tracking, obviously, the year built for these buildings, as well as the number of parking spaces on site, to track how many of these developments are more car-oriented and how many of them are potentially more transit-oriented or pedestrian-oriented with limited parking. So preliminarily, this is current status of development activity along the corridor. You can see, obviously, there's more development activity centered around the greater downtown St. Petersburg, and then limited development activity along the Central Avenue portion outside of downtown, and then along the beaches in South Pasadena. You can see we're tracking these developments within a half mile of the stations that were urban denoted in the Sunrunner Rising development study, and then the non-urban stations, so the village and neighborhood stations that were identified in that study, we're tracking within a quarter mile of those stations. So these are all the projects that fall into those categories. You can see, obviously, there's a critical mass in downtown St. Petersburg at the moment. So like I said, these projects range from small townhome developments to large mixed-use towers that we see in downtown St. Petersburg with large cranes and things of that nature. Developers have identified that the Sunrunner is becoming an amenity along the corridor, and we're hearing that both in real estate listings along the corridor, where people are selling land along the corridor that specifically mentions the Sunrunner as an asset for that location. And then we're also seeing residential units along the corridor note their proximity to these stations and giving the proximity to downtown an ability to easily access downtown. So even though the Sunrunner is only 1 year old, we are starting to see people in the real estate community identify it as being an asset that they can sell to others along the corridor. So preliminarily, we're tracking 76 projects with 12,695 residential units in development, a little over 2,000 hotel rooms, and 2 million square feet of commercial space with a total development value of $7.5 billion. A lot of that, a substantial number of that, which I'll talk about in a bit, is going to be with the historic gas plant district redevelopment. So some examples of some of the ongoing development along the corridor. We've got Orange Station, which is directly adjacent to the 13th Street station on the Sunrunner. This is a mixed-use development with office space and workforce housing along with retail. Some of the more mixed-use developments, like the residences at 400 Central, which is adjacent to the 5th Street and 1st Avenue South station, and then the Bayfront Health Medical Pavilion, which is a medical office building on the Bayfront campus, which is near the station at USF St. Pete. So some development trends along the corridor. I gave this a similar presentation to the Planning Committee about a month ago, a little over a month ago. Over the past 6 months, there has been a noticeable slowdown in development activity in St. Petersburg. As you all may understand, rising interest rates coupled with construction costs and other factors have led to some developers to pause some of their new development activity. And so we're starting to see that slowdown of people proposing new projects. So developers who already had financing locked up are continuing to obviously build their developments and move forward, but developers that did not previously already have construction financing locked up are starting to sort of push pause. A lot of those, as we've seen in the past decade with different cycles of the real estate cycle, a lot of those projects will come back to life once market conditions get better. So, and then I want to touch on the historic gas plant redevelopment, which many of you are familiar. Our hometown baseball team has proposed a new baseball stadium, which I'm sure most of you have read or know a lot about. This 86-acre development in downtown St. Petersburg provides a large portion of the development activity that's proposed along the corridor, including nearly 6,000 units, both some of them on-site, a few of them off-site, as well as senior housing units and hotel units and office space. And I wanted to provide this rendering of this proposed development because you could see at the bottom left, the Sunrunner is included on that rendering, and it's adjacent to 2 Sunrunner stops. And so these 6,000 new residential units will provide some built-in demand for the Sunrunner, and I'm really excited about that. And with that, I will welcome any questions or comments that you have about real estate along the corridor.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one question. You said that the study of the infill in the neighborhood and village descriptors was a quarter mile from each station?
Correct.
Versus a half mile in the urban areas.
If I recall correctly, yes.
So those other 2 designations are meant to be more spread out, right? The village, the neighborhood are more spread out, less dense developments. So I would have assumed that that we would be looking at a half mile or even further for development that is trans-oriented to the Sunrunner. I'm wondering why we went smaller, not bigger.
So the land use changes along those, the urban noted stations are already in mixed-use zoned areas. The stations that were denoted as village or more neighborhood scale stations are largely surrounded by single-family homes, and the zoning does not allow additional development. So if the city of St. Petersburg were to adjust land use around those stations that facilitated more intense use of those areas, there's potential to sort of expand that. But right now, if you go within a half mile of some of the stations in central Pinellas, you can only build a single-family home. So the development potential of those sites, as land use currently stands, is pretty limited. The city is looking at changing some of the land use along 22nd Street and 31st Street in the Grand Central District to adjust some of those land use, but as far as changing the land use, the underlying land use in central Pinellas along the Central Avenue corridor, I believe they're only looking directly at the parcels on Central Avenue, which would be within that that quarter mile range.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Thanks, and I'll just add to that the work that we're doing on zoning around transit-oriented development is really not a cookie-cutter approach, and that's why you see those changes, because we do take into consideration that there are historic districts nearby, and we also want to consider that not everyone wants to live in an apartment or a condo or a townhouse. So we really want to make sure we have something for everyone and that we preserve the character of the individual neighborhoods that are on or near the Central Avenue corridor, while we look for opportunities to create more density that's needed for our growing city. And I absolutely love that the Sunrunner has become a real selling point when it comes to development. When I first moved to St. Petersburg, there wasn't a whole lot going on. Downtown was just starting its renaissance, and there was really nothing west of 5th Street in downtown St. Petersburg. Now we're looking at 35th Street and beyond. And yes, the cranes really do tell the story. And even with the slowdown, what I'm being told from friends in the development community is that slow doesn't mean stop. We will continue to welcome new people to our area, and we're trying to kind of catch up right now with our planning, which ultimately will have a positive impact on affordability. So I love how it's all working together. I appreciate the presentation and especially coming from you, Anthony, with all of your focus on these specific types of projects. Having your input and sharing that information today is much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Our next item is the Community Sentiment Survey. For that, Tamika White, Deputy Director of Talent Management, will introduce the members of HCP, the consulting firm who recently completed PSTA's Community Sentiment Survey. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Driscoll, members of the board, Mr. Miller. I'm Tamika White, PSTA's Deputy Director of Talent Management. Like all the business that we bring before the board, this item supports PSTA's Sustainable Strategic Plan and the triple bottom line priorities of healthy communities and workforce, environment, and economic vitality. One of the ways we measure our performance in healthy communities and workforce is by conducting tri-annual surveys with members of the community who specifically do not use our services. This is largely a measure of whether non-riders know about PSTA and if they feel that PSTA delivers value for reasons other than riding. Perhaps the economic impact we have on local tourism and land development, or reducing traffic on the roads, or the environmental impact of reducing greenhouse emissions through our electric and hybrid fleet. We enlisted HCP associates to conduct our 2023 survey of community non-riders, and I'm pleased to introduce Robert Allen, Vice President of HCP, to share those results. Robert?
Thank you, Tamika. Well, I was very well introduced, so I'll just get right to it. I'm very pleased to present this study. As Tamika mentioned, our intention here is to capture community sentiment, particularly among non-riders. Just to clarify what that means, non-riders, it means that you have not taken a PSTA service more than 6 times in the last 12 months. So we do have a question you'll see at some point in this presentation about intermittent use, like less than 6 times a year, and so we will see that stat in this. This collects both qualitative and quantitative data, and one of the things that we're very proud of is that most of these questions are preserved over time, so we're able to trend these across time periods. What's very exciting about this study is it's really the first one since the COVID era, and it's exciting to see how those changes and trends have transpired. So this is a phone survey polling 1,000 residents 18 and older who are non-riders. Again, data was collected from March 9th through April 4th. It took approximately 15 minutes per completed survey. There were 19 questions total asked, and the margin of error was 3.1%. Again, 5% is kind of the default standard. Anything smaller than that is good, so we're very pleased with those results. I want to just briefly, I don't really have the laser here, but most people in Pinellas County own vehicles. 87% of our sample, and if you add the additional 8% that don't themselves own a vehicle but have access to one, that brings us to just about 95, 96% having some sort of ready vehicular access. We talk about changing the nature of, or the culture of transportation. It's important to remember that the overwhelming majority of people are still very much in their cars. Our sample is balanced perfectly along what I call the big 3 demographic variables: your gender, your race, ethnicity, and your age. We also make sure that our sample is geographically well distributed, and you'll see that on a map later on in this presentation. When it comes to income, which is another crucial demographic that we have, it's a harder one to control for, but we are very pleased with these results as well. Let me just get this mic right. We're very pleased with these results as well because the 2 brackets that are the most difficult to reach are our lowest income and our highest income brackets. And if you see, fully 16.4% of our sample refuse to disclose their income. So with all of that said, this is a very well-balanced sample that is very representative of Pinellas County residents who are non-riders of PSTA. So when we talk about brand awareness, we want to really dig into 2 concepts. The first is, are you readily aware of a brand? And the second is, do you have familiarity if someone were to make some type of passing mention of it or some sort of suggestion of it? What we see is that PSTA enjoys high rates of both. These 2 conceptions of awareness are called aided and unaided awareness. If you look at the bottom left chart here, The unaided awareness is that blue bar. That is the most important type of awareness because it is prompted without any mention of the organization's name. That's what you want. You want people to immediately know who PSTA is without even having to allude to what they are. We have seen that this number has jumped substantially since the COVID pandemic. So 67 in 2018, 73% in 2019, and then 4 years later in 2023, we see that number at 89%. Again, the aided awareness represents those additional people who, when we prompt them and say, do you know about Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority or PSTA? They say, oh yeah, of course. That's a lower quality of awareness, for sure. But when you see that the unaided awareness is reached about 90%, that means that people throughout the community are aware of who PSTA is, almost 20% more than before the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we ask about this slide, forgive me, this chart on the left represents the unaided awareness question. So we ask people who aren't familiar whether they know of Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority or whether they have used PSTA. Only 37% have used PSTA services less than 6 times in a year of that sample. So we have to remember this is a non-rider sample. Again, that's that 6 times or fewer per year. 37% had taken advantage of some type of PSTA service within the last 12 months, who are, again, otherwise non-riders. When we ask people what they think about with PSTA, this is something I really want to call attention to. Of course, most people mention trolley services or public transit, bus company or public transit, but the trolley services number is a large share of those first impression responses. This is how PSTA's brand awareness is starting to grow in the community. They're becoming aware of specific routes, including the Sunrunner that was just mentioned. Let's take a look at this trend over time. When you look at the trolley services, really what I want to call attention to in this slide is the trolley services figure. It was 27% made mention of that in 2018, and that has jumped a further 10 percentage points to 37% by 2023. People are still remembering the organization for its primary functions and roles, but these trolley services are really jumping up in awareness in terms of how people are recognizing the organization. We ask about whether people are familiar with key programs, services, and amenities, including certain routes. And what we see is really a kind of a cluster of a couple different things. First and foremost, everybody knows that PSTA runs the buses, so congratulations. It's probably good that you have your brand on the side of them. People also have a high expectation that most buses have Wi-Fi, senior citizen reduced fares, and disabled citizen reduced fares. Now, I want to be very clear here. This doesn't necessarily mean that they are familiar with these programs as PSTA implements them. This is an awareness study where we're asking people who don't ride the bus about what features they're aware of that PSTA provides. But what we do know is that these are very common features across public transit systems in the United States. So I just want to be a little bit cautious when we talk about asking people who don't ride the bus. It's not necessarily that they go, oh yeah, PSTA's buses, they all have Wi-Fi on them. They just expect that these are services that are provisioned as part of a modern public transit system. When we talk about some of these other programs offering services and amenities, what then continues to rise to the top are some of our specific routes, like the Jolly Trolley at 73% having some sort of awareness with that. So again, I want to go back to this point that these specifically branded routes tend to be really popping in the overall non-ridership community. And I think that provides a little bit of a hopeful message or optimism for how to encourage greater choice ridership among the residents in Pinellas County. Just to call attention to one or two trends here, what I would really like to make note of, I just had it highlighted, is the large jump of people who had awareness of the transit app. So again, we had 42%, 43% in the pre-COVID era. We're at 67% having awareness of that now. So whether that's, again, an expectation of riders or an actual reality of their knowledge is a little bit difficult to define, but we do see greater awareness of that as well as with these trolley routes. So I want to very quickly disclaim on this slide that the Sunrunner is included on this chart, and it is not a trolley. It is a bus rapid transit. But these are the 4 routes that we have tested throughout this work. The other thing I'd like to point out here is that on the right of this slide, you see these dots that are plotted on the map. Those dots are rough estimates of where our respondents are located. So in this case, we've segmented them into 2 different geographic clusters, but I really want to call attention to the fact that this sample reached people all throughout Pinellas County. What we also see is that what's more important than where you live and your awareness of a route, so we basically slice this whether you're close to a particular route or farther away. We use 2.5 miles as our barometer for that. But it's less important your proximity to a route line than it is the time over which we've done this study. So in 2019, you'll see these blue bars here. You have the less than 2.5 miles and the greater than 2.5 miles for each of these given tested routes, those that were available in 19, that is. There is a big difference in some cases where when you're close to the route or farther away, there's maybe a 10 percentage point jump. But if you really look, the 2023 numbers are all higher across all of these routes. And whether you are closer or farther away from the routes, it doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of how much that awareness jumped. There are still routes that have more geographic proximity differences, such as the Central Avenue route with 69 and 59%. But again, these have both jumped from 50% and 39% as recently as 2019. The story here really is that these 4 routes and the trolley routes in particular that have existed for quite some time have jumped substantially in the public's knowledge and awareness. They really seem to be, in our estimation, driving increased awareness of PSTA as an organization writ large. We ask whether, these next 2 slides are very interesting and they do posit an interesting challenge for PSTA. We ask whether the organization is catering to several different populations. And what we see is generally a very good story. Overwhelmingly, everyone agrees that PSTA caters to tourists, commuters, bike riders, students, and even up to 20% of our sample says that they expertly cater to these populations. That's great, but what do we see here that's a little bit concerning? And I'll speak to this on the next slide as well. They're very even. These numbers are very smooth and even, and there's no story, there's no difference that's major or statistically significant between any of these. What that means is that people know PSTA, they're familiar with these new routes, they're familiar with some of these services, but they don't have an opinion on how much you guys are doing things in the community when it comes to these specific niche groups. This is a good and a bad thing. If there was a big problem with bike riders on PSTA buses and it made the news, we would expect this number on the bottom here to be different and lower in a significant way. So on one hand, you can interpret this as, you guys are doing great, there's no problems. But on the other hand, and I'm gonna speak to this in just a second, it speaks to a general ignorance among the population about having any perception that there's anything good or bad about bike riders or tourists and how they're using PSTA. This does provide an opportunity for increased messaging so that people have an awareness of what these different offerings are. This chart is where we ask about expectation gaps. We ask a series of different questions to our respondents about different key functions of a public transit agency. So providing good customer service, offering reasonable wait times, serving as a cross-bay transportation solution. And we ask them how important they think that it is that their local transit agency provides these things. Then we ask them, in your estimation, because they're not riders, how well do you think PSTA is delivering on these characteristics? And again, this is kind of that same story here. If we had a problem with, let's say, dirty bus stops, and I'm from Hillsborough County, so we know a thing or two about that, but you would see that dip in this chart. But because there are no dips in this chart, it can be interpreted as one of 2 things. One is nobody knows, and everyone's just saying, yeah, I think they're doing a pretty good job, which isn't a bad place to be. On average, your score is about that 7 out of 10 mark across all of these points. But there's also no indication that people have a great awareness of this. You can see results like this when it comes to ignorance and not just a general sense of everything being well performed. we would anticipate more variation in a better informed respondent base. So again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. People don't have time to worry about their local public transit agency if they don't take the bus. And they're not seeing anything in the news that's making them go, oh yeah, well, they're wasting money, so they're not a good steward of public dollars, or they're not offering reasonable wait times. So it's a little bit of a bifurcated tale here, of one of a little bit of ignorance in the general population, and also of not any major issues being detected or being reported by them, which is, again, a good thing. We ask about these kind of statements of strategic plan congruence. What is your reaction to the following statements? PSTA connects people with the places they need to go in the community. The PSTA provides effective, financially viable public transportation that supports our community, providing effective Pinellas transportation leadership, delivering customer-oriented public transit services, and in 2023, intentionally making diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority. What we see is a jump back to normal from the high point in 2019 for 3 out of 4 of these categories that we have been testing since before the pandemic. The one that is different that I would like to call attention to is the providing effective Pinellas transportation leadership. We didn't see a big change in that from 2019 to 2023, with approximately 2/3 consistently reporting that across the study's time period. When we talk about delivering a valuable service to residents of Pinellas County, there's an interesting story here. First and foremost, let's start with the good news. 95% of Pinellas County non-riding residents affirm that PSTA delivers a valuable service to residents of Pinellas County. Now, I'm getting that number by summing the strongly agree and the agree category. But there is, again, this opportunity for increased community engagement when we look at this trend away from strongly agree into regular agree, if you will. So although we still have 95% saying, yeah, PSTA is valuable to the community, and 95% is kind of a ceiling. You know, you really don't get better than 95% in an approval rating. But that shift from strongly to just kind of regular or a little bit more of a milquetoast agreement does represent a little bit of an opportunity for delivering and showing that value of PSTA to the larger community. And again, a lot of this, again, because I'm going back to these two, there's a sense of kind of an ignorance in the residential community that doesn't take the bus. Let's talk about the future, and then I'll get to my summary points and any questions you all may have. We ask whether you support the use of tax dollars to improve the county's public transit infrastructure. We see that 95% agree with that statement. I want to call attention to that word infrastructure. That's a key word in that question that we want to make sure is remembered. This figure is statistically a tie from the last time that this was tested in 2019. There's been no change in this question since before and after the pandemic. In 2019, we asked whether, based on what you know about PSTA, is the organization adequately funded, overly funded, or underfunded? And we've only seen one shift in this, and that is there is a shift away from those saying that it's underfunded to those saying that it's adequately funded, jumping about 7 percentage points from one to the other. What's most critical about this right side chart, 38%, a tie from 2019, are unsure. They don't know. So although there's been a shift in perception that you guys are doing okay, 38%, more than a third, say, I don't know, I don't have a clue. And there is an opportunity there for education as well. So let's talk about some summary points, and I'll answer any questions. There was a 16% increase in those who can recall the transit organization's name. That's fantastic. That is a large jump in awareness and is a testament to all of these things that PSTA is doing, driving an increased awareness of the organization. So people know about PSTA more than they did 4 years ago, for sure. But they are just not so familiar with the intricacies of the services that are provided, how well the services are provided, which makes sense because they're not using them. Nearly all respondents report that PSTA caters to different populations to some degree. That's a good thing, but again, it also can help us to understand a little bit of that ignorance in the population where they're just not keeping tabs on this stuff. Lastly, expectation gaps have increased, but they've been very consistent across that. So again, we see an increase in awareness. We see an increase in awareness driven by the trolleys in particular and now the Sunrunner, and we still see a general sense of good performance across all of these scores. Anyways, I know I covered a lot, so I'd welcome any questions you guys may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? No? Oh, Commissioner Flowers?
First of all, thank you for the presentation that you gave at the Planning Committee meeting. And I believe this data is noteworthy, particularly for our Communications Department as it relates to how we need to look at continuing to interact and educate the public on our services, not just having a, like a ceiling level, but having a more involved knowledge of what it is that we do. My question is, we surveyed 1,000 people. Of the persons, you may not have this number, of the persons that you called, do you have a percentage of the number of people that you called who declined to participate in the survey?
I don't have that number handy, but that is a number that we have. As a general rule, you have to call between 20 and 30 people to get one complete. That's a general rule. It's held steady since I've been in this business and doing surveys in Pinellas County for about 6 years now. So that rule, that has not changed. We've constantly debated other methodologies, and I could spend a whole afternoon with you talking about that. At this point, I continue to maintain that the telephonic survey approach, especially in Pinellas County, given certain key demographic differences in this county, maintains a good approach.
Yeah. And I know it also depends on the time that you call as it relates to who answers the phone. So
And we'd use a
as I
mixture of-
shared in the meeting, the mixed methodology approach that you used was an excellent one, I believe. And you already clarified in the very beginning the difference between Sunrunner and Trolley. So thank you so very much for that. But I just have, I guess, a general comment on the community sentiment slide where it says PSTA connects people with the places they need to go in the community. There was a shift here, as you stated, kind of back to the 2018 levels or so. Just saying to board members, we may see that slide even more based on what we just did regarding routes for future surveys. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Schulman?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks again. It was actually helpful to hear this presentation for a second time, because there's a lot of data in there. I did have a question on the community familiarity slide, slide 9, where it mentions the UPass. How did you mention that in the survey? Was it UPass or was it?
This question was narrated, so the survey giver would have gone down a list of these programs and asked basically a yes or no question for each. So it would have been spoken as UPass.
Okay, so that's interesting to me because I mean, it went from 40 to 63%, which is I think a pretty big jump. But I'd also I'm surprised to hear that people understand that, non-riders understand that as UPass, because we don't really talk about it as UPass versus, college students can ride free, Pinellas County school students can ride free.
Something that I don't think this chart shows is that we have custom clarification instructions in the case of a few of these, and UPass may be one of them. So I would want to follow up with you on that, because we do have custom instructions for a few of these that provide basically a description if they say, well, what is that?
Yeah, that would be interesting, at least for me, for some additional clarification.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, one, that's a big jump, and two, that's an area that, from a community sentiment since it is training the next generation of riders, it is building that base of community sentiment at the school age level, which is, I think, how we win over the next 20 years.
Any of those instructions that I mentioned would not have changed from 19 to 23. I can say that. I don't know the exact phrasing that would have been given if somebody said, can you tell me a little bit more?
Okay,
So
well,
I
that's
can
even more
follow up.
interesting because, we didn't have an agreement in 2019 with Pinellas County Schools. So trying to understand what that number actually means. And I know we talked about this at the Planning Committee meeting. There's also, I think, a decent change in the PSTA access awareness, which also, I think, coincides with the fact that we've moved away from cars that drive around with Care Ride on them to they now say PSTA access. So if you're a non-rider, you are seeing more, other than the bus, branded items that are helping to increase awareness. So I think that path has been a valuable one as well for the non-riders to understand what we do. So again, is any portion of this, not as a telephonic survey, but like an online survey that we can use in smaller so say we wanted to go into the schools or get with other groups and say, you're non-riders, can we
I mean, the questionnaire itself is an appendix on the report that we would have delivered to you all. There's nothing that says that you all could not load that. If you guys want our help with that, we would be happy to help putting that on an online platform. You know, I could talk again all day about online surveys. What's so important with them is you have to avoid self-selection bias. And telephone surveys are like it's a random hat, right? We're drawing, and there is something to be said about the type of person who would pick up the phone and, yeah, I'll talk to you for 15 minutes. And we can't control for that. And it is the one weakness of telephonic surveys. But with online surveys, the biggest challenge is you have, and this is my like spiel, so forgive me, but online surveys, you'll have organizations do this and they'll share them on social media. You're only gonna get your most passionate voices. And so it's the same thing whenever you deploy an online surveys, you wanna make sure that you have a good way of having your sample be selected, that it's not just selecting for the people who have the biggest axe to grind or the biggest thing to champion and boost.
And I appreciate that. I think one of the things that's most valuable in this presentation is not necessarily the numbers, but your explanation of them has been helpful. So I thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Oliver.
Yes, thank you. For many of us, this is the second time to hear this. For our new member, most of the items that we see go through a committee first, and a committee or finance primarily. So this is my second time through, so I've seen some things. Could we pull up the catering to populations slide?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like Commissioner Schulman's question about the language. I was an ordinary language philosophy student as an undergraduate, so I look at language as something that is meaningful in and of itself. The language of expertly caters to is not how real people speak and how real people think.
Absolutely.
And so when I see everything is between 96 and 99 to some degree, and then 18 to 20, you mentioned when you talked to the planning committee that sometimes people just say, well, you know, they kind of just check it out. They've checked out. Why use language like expertly caters to when you could say, and maybe you do on the survey, on a 7-point scale?
That's exactly what we do. Yes.
Okay, and so this expertly caters to is your language for us.
We say basic, and I can, again, the exact phrasing is in our report, but it's on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is doesn't cater to at all, and 7 is expertly caters to.
Okay.
How well do you think that PSTA caters to tourists, commuters, so on and so forth?
Do you think you could use how well it serves as opposed to expertly caters to? It just seems like an odd, not to belabor it, but it just seems like an odd.
I don't think there's anything, I don't think there's anything wrong with discussing that language, and I do think that's important. What is also important is maintaining the apples-to-apples comparison over time, and the original, going back to 2018, we've used that exact language, and so although we can do it in the sense that I have to then put a little asterisk and say, hey, from 2023 to 2024, we switched it from caters to serves, and then I could get a different comment that says, well, you changed the language and the results are different. Is that because of the language change, or is that because of a true shift in the population? So I would almost rather use that awkward phrasing again than change it, because then we don't know why the change happens in the numbers, because it could be resulting from the language shift, and it could be resultant from a true shift in the beliefs of the population that we're studying.
Does it seem odd to you that for every population that the response was between 96 and 98% and between 18 and 20%? Doesn't that seem a bit counterintuitive?
No, because again, it tells that story that I've been trying to narrate here of people don't have a great deal of awareness of that. Okay. To your point, Mr. Oliver, it's a matter of ignorance in the population. They just assume, well, yeah, they must be doing all right, and they're providing some sort of score. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you. I just had one additional question. For the demographics or the respondent profile, did we ask how long they've lived in Pinellas County?
We do, but we don't balance our sample around it. So that I can go and source that, but tenure is a question we typically ask in all of our studies.
Okay, because it would be interesting to see if there's a difference between people who have been here across the whole board, people who've been here a year, 2 or 3, and versus people who've been here, 5, 10,
Sure.
20, 100. Just to see how the marketing message is reaching, if people who are moving here with an understanding that transit is something that they used maybe where they were from versus here, and are we changing minds or just bringing people who are already transit oriented on board and they're moving into the community?
Pinellas County is a pretty established community, and without having the crosstab in front of me, I know that we have generally a high tenured population participating in these studies. When you look at that geographic distribution, again, it's important to remember that we're not just getting this isn't a St. Pete focused study, for instance. So we're getting a lot of communities that are very well tenured and have had people there for a long time. So I say that just to say that, let's say we were to cross-tab the data by less than a year, it probably would be less than 10% of the sample, and it would start to reduce our statistical accuracy. That doesn't mean we couldn't look at it, and I don't even want to speak for our full report because we may have some notes on that in there, but I just wanted to put that point out.
Thank you. It's an interesting study, and it's interesting to look at non-writers and what their idea is about PSTA. It can help us close the gap for those who might be on the fence, who could be writers, and it helps us identify opportunities to create the right messaging or programs with good communication about them to reach people and, turn those 6 rides a year or less into, 12 or more per year.
Something I just want to mention again is if there were problems, newsworthy, and I'm going to use that word news, I'm going to focus on it because people's perceptions are driven by what they read about an organization. If they don't experience and participate or partake in that service product, et cetera. If there was a terrible thing that happened affecting one of these points, I would expect that to dip in this radar screen. So again, I just want to drive home that point that although this does speak to an ignorance, it also speaks to a lack of a big problem that the general public has become aware of. So I don't look at this entirely in a bad light. I do I wish we had a positive spike in one of these aspects? Absolutely. But I think that also we would see a bad dip if we had some sort of PR crisis in the time period of the study.
Mm-hmm. And it is interesting that the catering to populations response is so evenly spread. And I totally agree that is both good news and an area of opportunity. So if I didn't know much about PSTA, I might say yes to a lot of these things because I just assume they're doing a good job.
And you have to remember that a 4 out of 7 is a middling score. So we're saying, basically, it's kind of a passing grade, right? If you give a 4 or a 5, it's more like a B or a C, really. It is the middle score and beyond that we're counting here. So they're not giving stellar marks except for that 7 or that 20%, say, that are giving us 7s out of 7.
Mm-hmm. Right. When I'm talking with people in St. Petersburg just about, our city and where it's going, I like to ask 2 questions. What are we good at and what are we known for? It's not always the same thing, but it helps, start a conversation about what those opportunities are. And I think here we have a chance to grow with both. We know that there are a lot of things that we're good at. We want to make sure that we're known for that and that, specific things stick out. Although it's, I actually love this slide because it really reminds me of how many different kinds of people with different kinds of needs we are truly there for. So I think this is the start of a great roadmap for some future initiatives, especially with our messaging. I did want to ask about the increase in familiarity. Not really a question, I'm just hoping that staff will take a look at that and from, 2019 to now and all of that, what have we changed? Have we, and I think a lot of that is with our marketing, but it's also some of the new programs. So I'd love to see a deep dive into where that increase is coming from so that we can identify those things that we're doing well. So that would be a great start. If you could go to slide 15, where it talks about the use of tax dollars to improve the county's public transit infrastructure.
Yes, ma'am.
So if someone called me, so if I was on the phone and someone asked me that, I'd be like, I have no idea what that means. So how did you explain, so was there an explanation of infrastructure? And you even mentioned yourself that that could be something that some people don't really get what you mean by that, because infrastructure is the key word.
Infrastructure is the key word. I don't believe we define infrastructure in any greater detail. I do want to go back and confirm that, but I do not believe so in this case. It's not a mystery. The word infrastructure is very important because it does speak to things like roads and
Right.
other non-transit related items. And I think that is very important. We say public transit infrastructure, but that word infrastructure does carry a lot of weight. We've asked the same question that we asked in 2019 for the same reasons I just explained to Mr. Oliver. I do think it may be worthwhile to talk about, the challenge with a study like this is we don't want to get into too much of the, well, what would you vote for type things, because it's not really this type of study. And so I think that digging into this a little bit more would start to become a little bit of a poll. And so I kind of like the way that this question is phrased that way because of that reason. I'll stop there.
Yeah, unfortunately, it leaves us with a little bit of a guessing game as to what people think it meant. So I think in the future, we might want to
Absolutely.
just look at maybe just a slight change that would help to define that better so that we know we're getting an accurate response.
A lot of people have a lot of different ideas about what they think public transportation is. And I do think that
Right.
is something that this question does not fully capture.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
you so much.
Really appreciate the presentation today.
Who shall I
The
hand
next
this off?
presentation will be our community bus plan update. Jacob will now provide an overview on the ways that the PSTA board can provide input to the community bus plan.
All right, thank you, Chair, and hello again. All right, so last week, the Planning Committee with our consultant team and myself had a really great discussion around the bus plan, talking about a lot of the key trade-off questions and the public engagement activities that are going to happen through this process. And so today, I'd just like to provide a brief summary of that conversation, as well as what the ongoing public engagement will look like over the next few months, as well as the involvement of this board. So just a quick recap, the community bus plan is really a guidance document that will allow us to provide guidance of how we plan and prioritize transit improvements over the next 10 years. And so we do that with our consultant team by assessing how our current transit network is serving our community and engaging the community in key trade-off questions. And doing these activities will allow us to develop a series of route change recommendations, and we will do this under multiple funding scenarios. And so just a kind of a sample of what some of these key questions that we discussed more in depth at the Planning Committee look like. So just kind of have a sample of 3 here for you. So some of these questions that we'll be asking the community and this board is, firstly, how do we go about allocating service? So one way we go about asking this question is on a spectrum between coverage and ridership goals. So on a spectrum, how does the community and this board feel about allocating service? For a coverage goal extreme, you might put service a little bit everywhere, not necessarily focusing on ridership, but focusing more on geographic coverage. And the other end of the spectrum, focusing on a ridership goal where you may not have service everywhere, but you're allocating service where transit works best. So engaging the community of where we should be at on that spectrum. Also asking a question of bus stop spacing, of if riders would rather have more options for bus stops, or would riders rather have bus stops spaced a little farther apart, but perhaps that could mean that their buses could travel a little more quickly. And lastly, would riders rather walk or wait? And so what I mean by that, shown the example here, is there are 2 routes in this neighborhood that run every 30 minutes, so somebody could maybe have a short walk but a long wait for a bus route. Or would riders rather, in the image shown on the right, in the bottom right graphic, have a longer walk but a shorter wait through a more frequent route? And so these are the types of questions that we're going to be asking the community and this board to provide input on. And we're going to be doing that through this public engagement process shown here. So we are going to have an online public survey that was just released in the last few days. So we will be publishing this online, but we'll also be administering this in person at public engagement events over the next few months. So we'll be tabling events over the next few months through December in this first phase, as well as having a series of public meetings. And in addition, so next month, so we just completed, for the first part of this project, our onboard survey so we can have ridership profiles by route and for our whole system of our ridership. So myself and the consultant team will be coming to the planning committee next month to provide the overview of the onboard survey results. And so once this first phase of public engagement is complete, we will be having a board workshop with you all in January. I believe Rachel sent out a doodle poll last week to schedule that, so I would encourage you to fill that out if you have not yet, so we can get that on the calendar. And so we'll be at that board workshop summarizing the first phase of public engagement as well as the results of the survey. And really the goal is to to receive direction on how we should go about developing route recommendations in phase 2 of the project before we ultimately finalize and adopt the final plan next summer. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Questions from the board? Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you. Just one question for clarification. Looking at the Community Bus Plan Choices Report.
Yes.
There's a section that talks about need for youth, that youth generally have less access to vehicles. They can't afford a car, or they're too young to drive. But then when looking at the existing transit network, it lists access for jobs. It doesn't list access for schools. So I'm wondering if, when we're doing this community engagement portion, if we can make sure that we're sampling students as well and families to understand what the need is from a school perspective or from a student perspective.
Oh, yes, no, absolutely. It's definitely our intention to have Pinellas County Schools as a stakeholder in this process. And actually through my recent Leadership PSTA community resource event, I now actually have several contacts with the school system who I want to engage with and make sure that we're working with them to get student input, since that is definitely important to make sure we do that.
And I would encourage you to try wherever possible to work directly with parents and families and parent organizations. As school administrators already have enough on their plate.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to our reports and correspondence along with future meeting subjects. Brad, would you like to give us an update on the reports that are in our packet?
Good morning. Okay. So in your packet, in the reports, you'll note that we're moving to a new reporting process for our ridership reports by providing better information, but it's now for the prior month. So in your packet is the August ridership reports. This way, PSTA Planning Division can make a more thorough report to the Finance Committee when they present this information each month in more detail. Fares were instituted on the Sunrunner on October 1st. So far, minimal evasion has been reported. That seems to be going pretty well. Overall, ridership is down on the Sunrunner since we instituted fares, but hopefully it will start to rebound soon. One way we think that might be possible is the upcoming Halloween on Central event this coming weekend. And it's a great way to try out the Sunrunner while wearing some kind of interesting costume. Earlier this week, yesterday, I got the opportunity to present to the Institute for Transportation Engineers, Florida and Puerto Rico chapter, down in St. Petersburg, along with the Secretary of Transportation for Florida, Jared Perdue, and Whit Blanton. And I was really happy to present to them a group of basically transportation consulting engineers from around the state. And they used they got a tour of the Sunrunner as part of their conference and went to dinner on the Sunrunner last night, I understand. Next week, on November 1st, the City of St. Petersburg's program to support transportation disadvantaged fares for city residents begins. And then the following week, on November 10th, the program to allow veterans to get a Flamingo fare card to allow free riding begins. Thanks to Commissioner Latvala for joining me to kick this program off at the Bay Pines Hospital on Thursday, November 9th at 10 a.m. And I believe you all have a little flyer, I'll save the date, for that event. Also on November 1st, we're welcoming the Florida Department of Environmental Protection officials. Florida DEP folks are going to be here at PSTA. I think you have a little notice of that. And you're welcome to come to that to thank them for the VW settlement funds that allowed us to purchase the zero-emission electric buses that we have. That's at 1 p.m. on November 1st, so some stuff to look forward to next week. Also, just on your calendar, thanks to the eagerness of Commissioner Saraki, I'm not sure if you all still have the calendar invite to the Leadership PSTA graduation ceremony on November 17th. I think maybe you accepted, and then maybe, at least I got an email from you that you had deleted it, but hopefully that is back on your calendar. November 17th, 12 p.m., Feather Sound Country Club.
I got the same thing. I called them. I was like, who canceled this?
I think I made a mistake on my phone. I don't know what I did, but it
It's
sent
okay.
you all an invite, so I fixed it, but yes, it's on my calendar.
Okay, good. Good. We'll celebrate the graduates of Leadership PSTA at that event. As was mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting, shout out to Al Burns for graduating Leadership APTA and Tamika White for entering the Leadership APTA class. And Cassia Harris, who has continued in the Leadership and APTA's Emerging Leaders Program. And speaking of Cassia, you want to stand up? As I sent an email to you all last week, I'm happy to have her transition into the new leadership role as our IT director. So way to go. Yeah. So next meeting, when the voting system doesn't work, you know who to complain to. Looking ahead, on Friday this week, I'll be in Washington, D.C. for my National Academies of Sciences research program meeting to select transportation research projects. And then about a week later, I'm going to be heading with Mayor Saraki and Commissioner Robinson to our first Tallahassee trip during the committee week. Coming up in November at the Finance Committee, it's on November 15th, we're going to start with a PSTA access discussion. But I'll also be giving the committee an update on our benchmarking efforts that were part of the American Benchmarking Group. And last but not least, I do have one other thing. Juan, could you advance the slide? Or someone could advance the slide? I think there's a picture. As part of the recent St. Petersburg Shine Mural Festival, there it is, our customer service center in Williams Park got a mural. This was done by an artist who he's in the picture there, called Artist James. And the man in the picture is John Donaldson, the first African-American owner of property in Pinellas County. That he painted on.
History store if y'all ever want to hear it out there.
Yeah, but that is the, that's down in Williams Park, so I thought that was pretty cool. Last but not least is I'm happy to report that PSTA and the smaller of our two unions has reached a tentative agreement on a new 3-year contract that will be voted on by the SAIU next week and then presented to the PSA Finance Committee on November 15th. Thanks to Chief Operating Officer James Bradford for leading a successful, within-budget negotiation. So that concludes my update.
All right, thank you. Do any board members have any other business to discuss today? Commissioner Cox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Brad, just a quick question. Since we've implemented the fares on Sunrunner, and Sheriff Gualtieri had mentioned that he would come back to us and report if there's been a change. They've noted a change in St. Pete Beach on any of the ridership behavior. And have you heard anything on that or from the sheriff?
Whoops. I got one report from the sheriff's office about 2 weeks ago. So far, so good. You know, he wasn't really ready to commit to any success or thing like that, but at least no news is
Okay.
good news. And it was positive in the first 2 weeks.
Okay, and I've ridden the Sunrunner a few times since the fairs have been implemented, and I have to commend the way that not only the drivers, but the security personnel we have handle the situation when people don't tap, you know, and they, not the drivers as much, but the security personnel are very tactful in the way they handle, they're not throwing
That's
people
the
off the
goal.
bus.
That's the
Yeah,
goal.
that's good, that's very good. And
Yeah.
That's all I have to say, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Commissioner Petrilla.
Yeah, I spoke with the sheriff yesterday afternoon, and he mentioned he had planned on coming probably to the next board meeting in December to give an update.
Oh, excellent, thank you. So maybe make a note to confirm that for the agenda. Okay, great. Anyone else? All right, well, it was a pleasure to join the team in Orlando for the APTA conference, to be able to accept the award. I also had the pleasure of speaking on a panel discussion with the mayors of Nashville, Tennessee, and Vancouver, Washington, along with the CEO of Amtrak, to talk about the relationship between cities and transit and how we work on policy. I was able to talk about the Sunrunner and its success being a result of the collaborative effort at all levels of government, from the cities up to the feds. And then I talked a little bit about our regional MPO efforts that we have on Forward Pinellas. So it was just wonderful to be able to represent PSTA on that. But mostly, it was wonderful to witness our hardworking staff being recognized for all of their efforts. The Outstanding Transit System of the Year award is not just from the work of one person. Brad is a great leader, but he's also assembled a great team, and that's what good leaders do. So I was very excited to be able to help celebrate you all, and you make me very proud to be a part of this board within this organization. So congratulations again, and I can't wait to see what you pull in next year. All right, do we have any other comments from the board? All right, our next meeting will be December 6th, 2023 at 9 a.m. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, what was it? What was the date where?
That's awesome.
Brad, you want to meet? It was deleted.
Oh, that's Monday, right?
Because there's nothing on my calendar.
Up to you and Mr. Donaldson. Yeah, we can meet real